and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. I'm Joanna Hernandez. Here's what we're looking at. The Army Corps of Engineers is dropping a plan to expand a toxic dump on the southeast side after community pushback. Medical students are enrolling fewer Black and Latino students, how that can impact patient outcome. And we're gearing up for tonight's lunar eclipse, what you should know about the dazzling display. And now to some of today's top stories. A federal judge is ordering tens of thousands of fired federal workers to be rehired immediately. The California judge says probationary workers at 6 federal agencies must be reinstated after being fired last month, amid President Donald Trump's efforts to shrink the federal workforce. In his ruling, the judge called the mass firings a sham strategy by the government to sidestep federal law, noting some workers had been told they were fired based on their performance. But the order also says agencies can conduct reductions in force, but have to follow certain procedures. The 6 agencies include the Departments of Agriculture, Defense, Energy, Interior, Treasury, and Veteran Affairs. The White House called today's order absurd and unconstitutional. And Governor J.B. Pritzker is warning that the future of student learning is at risk. Today, he addressed a packed audience of educators from across the state at the Illinois Education Association conference in Rosemont. He says they are ready to fight against the Trump administration, which he says is jeopardizing more than $3 billion in federal funding for education in Illinois. Pritzker says students in low-income rural communities depend on that funding to provide programs like free lunches and resources for students with disabilities.
They take away funding, which is their goal, from kids across this nation who deserve to be able to get a good public education, and in particular from some of the most vulnerable people in our society. And we're talking about people who are disabled, people who have special needs, special education. When you take away 10 to 12% of the funding for education across this nation, you're damaging what we can do for our people here in the state of Illinois.
Pritzker also announced today that Illinois is joining 20 other states in a federal lawsuit challenging sweeping layoffs at the Department of Education. And local Uber drivers are mobilizing and seeking to unionize. Dozens of drivers rallied outside the company's offices today to demand the option to join a union. Organizers say the company is benefiting from their work while drivers deal with unfair conditions. They say joining a union will help negotiate better standards. And are you ready to get your green on? Chicago's annual St. Patrick's Day celebrations are happening this weekend. The Chicago River will be dyed a festive shade of green on Saturday morning beginning at 10 a.m. The city says the best place to watch is along the river between State Street and Columbus, so you have to get there early. Meanwhile, the 70th annual St. Patrick's Day Parade kicks off downtown at noon Saturday, and the Southside Irish Parade begins at noon Sunday in the Beverly neighborhood. So many festivities. Up next, a controversial plan to expand a toxic dump on Lake Michigan is getting well dumped. We explain right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, is made possible in part by the support of these donors.
The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is dropping its plan to expand a toxic dump on Lake Michigan. It comes after a years-long battle with community members and environmentalists on the city's southeast side. Our own Patty Wetley joins us now with more on what this means. Patty, this has been a years-long battle,
yes,
as I just mentioned. First of all, what is this toxic sludge and what were they planning to do with it?
Right, so toxic sludge, that's all the sediment that gathers on the bottom of like the Calumet River, the Cal-Sag channel, and the Army Corps has been dredging it to keep that channel navigable for shipping. It could just normally dump that back into the lake, but because it's contaminated with chemicals, pollutants like arsenic, mercury, lead, it needs to place it in what's called a confined disposal facility. So that already exists right there on the mouth of the Calumet River. It's been there for 40 years. And the Army Corps wanted to expand it by 20 more feet high and continue dumping the sludge there.
And some people were like, hold up.
Right,
No.
right. You had folks with the Alliance of the Southeast, which is a community organization in the Southeast side neighborhood of Chicago, Friends of the Parks, and the Environmental Law and Policy Center working the sort of legal angle for them, objecting to it because that community is already overburdened, they say, with dumps, with pollution, with industry. Friends of the Parks had long been promised that once this site maxed out, and it's been there for 40 years.
And they've been doing so much work, right, for the ecosystems on Lake Michigan.
They've wanted to like complete this lakefront path that's part of like the last 4 miles and to put a park there. That was the promise, that the Army Corps would be like, we'll shut it down, we'll give you these 45 acres, remediate the site, and it'll be parkland for the community. So they're like, you made the promise, now you're going back on it.
Going back on it. So what's next?
So the issue now is the Army Corps has withdrawn its plan, but if they're still going to dredge, they're still going to maintain that shipping channel, where's this toxic sludge going to go? And they said they already explored alternate sites and nobody else wanted this in their community. So they're going to really have to work with state and local officials to find a place to put this stuff.
No, exactly. Well, thank you, Patty.
Nobody wants the sludge.
Nobody wants the sludge. It's understandable. Well, thank you for breaking it down for us.
Thanks, Joanna.
And you can read Patty's full story on our website. It's all at WTTW.com/news. Since the U.S. Supreme Court struck down affirmative action 2 years ago, diversity is in decline at medical schools nationwide. This includes a more than 10% drop in enrollment for Black and Latino students, despite an increase in applicants. Joining us now with more on the potential impact on patients are Dr. Susie Lopez, a primary care physician and assistant dean of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Rush University Medical Center. She's also the co-advisor of the Latino Medical Student Association, and Dr. Monica Maloof, a primary care physician and assistant dean of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Loyola University Chicago School of Medicine. She's also an associate professor of medicine. Thank you both for joining us. Dr. Maloof, I want to start with you. When you read about the decline in medical students from different cultural backgrounds, such as Latinos, what goes through your mind as also a woman of color?
You know, I think overall the decline is really harmful for our patients, our communities that we live in, as well as for the medical societies. We know that from really good data that having diverse physicians and nurses helps improve patient outcomes, helps patients meet their healthcare goals and live longer, but it also helps the physician workforce. Physicians who work in diverse environments tend to do better, have better job satisfaction, and are able to care for diverse communities better. So this decline is really concerning for the medical landscape as a whole across the board.
And Dr. Lopez, what would you say are some obstacles students of color face when deciding to enter the medical field?
Well, I think the collective have different obstacles, but one of the biggest ones is financial. You know, we may come from, or I come from a first generation family. Being the first in their families to go to finish high school, go to college, or beyond. So not having that mentorship is part of it as well. There are students who are very, very motivated students, but maybe not DACA recipients that don't have access to student loans and many other students have. And then the other part is sometimes you didn't see a physician in color in my role, probably until I was in medical school. And so when kids or youth, the one that looks like them, would just see that standard themselves. So all of those got up to not having that many in the physical workforce.
That's understandable. And Dr. Maloof, why is it incorporating diversity and health equity and resident education so important?
So I always like to say that we tried to get to health equity by accident, and it didn't work. What I mean by that is that for many decades in U.S. Society, in medical schools, we hoped that physicians would treat all patients the same and all patients would do great no matter where they came from or what the color of their skin was. But over the last several
Okay,
decades,
right.
we've realized that that's caused a lot of disparities. So, Black and Latino patients and Hispanic patients are more likely to die from chronic diseases like diabetes and heart disease at a higher rate than white patients. So, in order to help mitigate and bridge that gap, we really need to be educating our physicians and our residents to be the best they possibly can be at taking care of all patients, regardless of where they come from, and recognizing that these disparities exist so they could work towards mitigating them.
And Dr. Lopez, this next question is, what are the benefits for patients to have physicians who are from their own race and ethnicity? I remember growing up, going to the clinic at that time, spending all day at the clinic. My mom didn't have insurance at that time. And I remember having to translate because the doctor only spoke English. How important is it?
It's really important. It's not just the language, it's the connection with culture. Um, and I remember this story because it just speaks so much to having that connection with the culture and understanding the culture. There was a patient who had a stroke and he couldn't speak. He could understand us, but it was hard for him to express himself. And there was one day where he just did this little head nod, and we tend to do that in the area of Mexico where we're from to say hello, just "Hola." And I was going to connect him, and so we started connecting, and I was just asking him, "Are you from Mexico?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm from a bunch of big farm." So it's not just the language, it's definitely a cultural connection where those connected migrants and patients can reach out to.
What are your thoughts, Dr. Malouf?
Yeah, I mean, I echo everything Dr. Lopez said that it's so impactful for patients to have a physician that speaks their language and understands their culture. And that doesn't just have to be that you're from the same culture, but just coming in with an understanding and an openness. And so that's what I was alluding to earlier about having diverse medical schools. It makes all the doctors better because they're all then trained to take care of and interact with people from different backgrounds and understand that you need to adjust your recommendations based on cultural nuance, cultural differences, and social differences. So that diversity is so important for all of us as we train and grow together, but then also for our patients and being able to connect with them.
And in that aspect, Dr. Malouf, what are your thoughts on the Trump administration's executive order to target DEI programs, and how would you say this affects the future of health equity?
Such a great question. It's been a really challenging time for all of us in the diversity space. I will say that as a dean of DEI, I welcome criticism. If you have thoughtful, um, really evidence-based ways to help us improve, I welcome that because what we're doing is innovative and new and bold, and we need that feedback to be able to get better. But what's happening is not that. What's happening is indiscriminatory attacks that are really persecutory. And the results of that is that all these benefits that we talked about with health equity, diversifying the physician workforce are threatened. And that's going to just threaten the health of all Americans, not just those of color.
Same question for you, Dr. Lopez. What are your thoughts when you see, some of these programs at jeopardy? What do you think that people are not understanding of how essential these DEI programs are?
Yeah, I mean, I echo a lot of what Dr. Lewis has just said, but I think one thing that people forgot is that diversity, equity, and inclusion is not just race and ethnicity, it's the gender, sex, it's women's rights, it's the right to maternity and paternity leave, it's making sure that people have accessible exercise and facilities. So it impacts everyone, it's not just for one group.
And what would you say, I'm just Dr. Lopez, what can you tell us a bit about your background and what type of discrimination you even have experience in healthcare?
Yeah, I would say the most common one I experienced as a woman, but also the women of color. Many times I talk to my female colleagues and some of my residents, they will usually say or raise their hand if we ask, have you ever been confused for anyone other than the physician or the patient's physician? And they'll raise their hands, and most time the answer is, yeah, I was confused for a nurse or maybe physical therapist. And we love our nurses and our physical therapists, but the intersectionality that I have is I'm a woman and women of color. And so a lot of patients and families don't see people like me. in that rule. And so I may get confused for environmental services or food service. Someone there who's there to pick up their meal tray. So having to, you know, probably more than once a day, reassure them and kind of let them know that it's not me. I'm happy to help you, but I'm your physician today. And I'm here to talk to you.
Same question for you, Dr. Malouf. Have you ever had to experience, these type of obstacles and challenges?
I think that I've been really blessed to have a really supportive training environment everywhere that I've been. But those examples that Dr. Lopez gave are examples that I think echo across the medical spectrum for women and women of color. I've had many experiences that are just like that. But I think that what I really focus on is my students that we mentor and teach, and how to help create a more inclusive environment so they don't have to go through this training and feel like they don't belong. They don't belong in that white coat. They don't belong as in that hospital, in this medical school. And having so many experiences like that that have become normalized, it can sometimes feel like that for those students. They can have what's called imposter syndrome, feeling like they don't belong because they walk into the hospital and someone thinks they're there to clean the floors. So a lot of our work in the Office of Diversity here is to help make sure that the medical school and our hospital is really safe and inclusive for everybody who walks through these doors, patients and students alike.
What advice, the ending question is, what advice would you give to someone who is interested in going into the medical field, and is a little bit nervous?
I can start by saying that being a doctor is the best job in the world. I have days that are terrible, and I'm come home and I'm exhausted and burnt out, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. I think being able to make an impact in my patients' lives, being able to connect them with the care they need, is something that gives me so much fulfillment, even when I'm exhausted and so burnt out. And I really want to encourage anybody who's thinking about going into medicine to, if you have that energy and that passion for helping people and taking care of your community, then listen to that and pursue a career in healthcare. It's a very rewarding career.
Well, thank you both for your feedback, and good luck with everything.
Thank you so much for having us.
Up next, what you need to know for tonight's total lunar eclipse. Don't go to bed too early tonight, Chicago. Get your binoculars out, because scientific magic rises in the sky tonight as a lunar blood moon eclipse will begin to be visible. And joining us with everything we need to know is our friend Joe Guzman, founder and CEO of Chicago Astronomer and NASA Ambassador. So nice to have you back. It's always lovely when you're here in the studio with us. And last time you were here, we talked about all the astronomical events happening this year, but tonight, we are talking about a total lunar eclipse. Remind us what that is.
Joanna, what a pleasure it is to join you once again. A lunar eclipse is when things get in the way of other things. In this case, the Earth is getting in the way of the sunlight hitting the moon. And it's a semi-rare event, and we only get 2 a year. And so let's enjoy this one, because we are perfectly suited in the Americas to view this event tonight.
Only 2 a year. That is
just
incredible.
about on the average, yes.
And there are different phases of this eclipse. Tell us what those are and what we can observe in each of them.
Oh, yes. Well, this starts at 12 midnight tonight, 11:57, 12 o'clock.
So we have to stay up. It's worth staying up.
It is. It is. And it will last for 5 hours till 5 in the morning. The meat of the eclipse, the sweet spot, is 2 a.m. And that's what you want to watch here. At the beginning, the moon will slowly dim, hit the sweet spot, and then slowly come back to its normal illumination.
And I'm trying to learn the terminology. I've been learning because of you. You know, what time does a totality reach its peak?
2 o'clock. 2 o'clock in the
2
morning.
o'clock in the morning. Oh, for those who have early risers, then you'll get to see it.
That's so true. Now you'll start to see the Earth's shadow take a bite out of the moon about 1:30. 2 o'clock's the sweet spot. 2:30, it's about over, and then for hardcore geeks like me, we're up to 5 o'clock watching.
Are you
this.
staying up the whole time?
I'm going to try to. Yeah, on my garage roof.
I know your wife is here. Is she staying up or is she going to bed?
No, she's going to bed. This is Joe's thing.
This is Joe's thing. Tomorrow she'll hear about it, basically.
She will.
I love that. Now, the total number of solar and lunar eclipses are similar, but lunar eclipses are most commonly observed. Why is that?
Well, because the the Earth's shadow covers the entire moon. Whereas on a solar eclipse, you got a tiny spot because the moon is much, much smaller than the Earth, and that arcs a tiny area that it passes over the Earth, wherever it may be. Usually it's Antarctica or some place that we're not going to go.
We're not going to
No,
go.
we're not.
Now, the phase blood, okay, this is interesting. Blood warm moon has been floating around to describe the eclipse. What's the meaning behind that?
Well, it's the color of the moon that apparently changes. It doesn't change color in reality. It's the atmosphere of the Earth that refracts the light from the sun and blocking out the blue wavelengths, and the red wavelengths pass through
Because
our
what we're
atmosphere.
seeing there on screen, it looks red.
That's the red wavelengths of the sun allowed to pass through the atmosphere. Now, if there is a volcano or a forest fire, it will deepen in color and get more of a blood moon.
That's so interesting. So many different things that we didn't know. Now, our last total lunar eclipse was back in November 2022.
Yes.
The next one is set for March of 2026. Why are they so widely spread out?
It's the
spaced out?
dance of the planets, the orbits of the moon. Now, the moon tilts 5 degrees up, 5 degrees down. It's got to be right in that sweet spot. It's called in that line. And if it isn't, then we're not going to get either lunar or solar eclipse.
I love it. So you brought binoculars.
This is
do you need these to see it? Okay.
It's a naked eye event. You can watch it safely. It's not like a solar eclipse where you have to wear special glasses. No, you can bring your family out, your little kids, and watch this for the 5 hours. But a pair of binoculars will enhance the view.
Enhance the experience.
It does. You're connecting more intimately. And a telescope, of course, would always improve the view on this. Any modest telescope will do. You don't want a lot of
You get
magnification.
the up-close 3D.
You do, most definitely. But optical enhancements really help the situation.
Now I want to talk about the Blue Ghost. There's also a lunar lander on the moon now called Blue Ghost. I have no idea what that is. Can you explain what that is intended to do?
This is a payload lander from the Firefly Aerospace Company. It's a private commercial company. The first time it has ever done this in the history of space exploration. And it has 10 experiments going on right now.
Experiments.
It's drilling, it's sniffing, it's looking, it's doing a whole bunch of, and they're all working. I'm very impressed by this machine. And it's a private endeavor, subcontracted by NASA.
And what would you say like the findings will look like? What are the predictions? Like, what are you hoping that?
The last astronaut on the moon was Gene Cernan.
Oh.
He reported that the lunar soil was levitating, an odd phenomenon due to electromagnetic influences on the surface. This machine's going to explore that and look at the sunrise coming over the moon, take some photos, videos on that, and measure what's going on.
Do you love that there's just more enthusiasm and passion for exploring the space?
We are in the golden age of space exploration right now with the technology. And we have space tourists going into space as well. Yeah, this is a fantastic time to be alive and to look at the
And
the
to look
stars.
at, and again, you just have to look up.
Just have to look up, most definitely. And you are not a observer, you're a participant. You are part of the universe. And so you're looking at yourself when you're looking up into space.
I love that. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but I am a little pregnant. And I was reading that, I don't know if this is a myth or not, but can pregnant women look up at an eclipse?
Yes, they can. It's folklore, and the idea behind it was that the light from the sun is being interfered with by the blockages of the Earth, and it may hinder the development of the baby. Our ancestors, the Aztecs, used to wear calzones rojos.
Red underwear.
Red underwear.
Red underwear.
And it's not so much in vogue now, but they wear red wristbands.
I do notice that. Wow. I always love how there's still all these superstitions and myths when there's any type of like eclipse.
Yeah.
That's always the interesting part. What other events are happening in the sky this year?
This is the only lunar eclipse of the year, so let's get out and enjoy it. But there's meteor showers, there's planetary conjunctions, and there's the glory of the universe with telescopes, naked eye. I love talking about this forever.
Holding these. No, I love it. Well, thank you so much for breaking it down for us. I'm going to leave it here. We have to leave it at that. I'm sure we'll see you again.
Excellent. Thank you.
And that's our show for this Thursday night. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 7 for the weekend review. Now, from all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Joanna Hernandez. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe. Buenas noches. And I'll be using my binoculars.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud to be a multilingual law firm that provides translators for a variety of languages.